Kimberly Taylor stood frozen before the mirror, white silk and crystals transforming her reflection into someone she didn't recognize. The forbidden wedding dress fit perfectly. The door swung open. Jeffrey Hemby stood there, his dark eyes locked on her. Not angry, something more terrifying. "Mr. Hemby, I'm sorry. I was just—" "Don't." His voice cut through the air. "Don't you dare take that off." Her hands trembled on the zipper. "I shouldn't have touched it." "How much do you need?" He pulled out a checkbook, already writing. "I don't understand." 500,000? $1 million? He held out a check. "Just wear it for dinner tonight." $1,000. Kimberly stared at the paper, her mind spinning. This man was insane, but her fingers closed around it anyway. "Just dinner?" "Just dinner. Then we discuss the rest." 20 minutes later. Kimberly sat in her basement room, the check burning in her pocket. Her phone rang. St. Mary's Hospital. "Miss Taylor, we need your decision tonight. Tyler's treatment slot. The deposit is $500,000. Without it, we give it to another patient." Kimberly looked at the check. $1 million. Enough to save her brother. "I'll have it tomorrow." One dinner. How hard could it be? At 7 p.m., Kimberly descended the grand staircase in a midnight blue gown, emeralds cold against her throat. Jeffrey waited at the bottom, devastating in black. His eyes swept over her, pain flashing across his face. "You look exactly like her." The dining room was lit entirely by candles. 2 places set at opposite ends of a massive table, husband and wife positions. They ate in tense silence. Finally, Jeffrey spoke. "The money wasn't just for tonight. I need you for 3 months." Kimberly set down her fork. "There's a merger. ChemCorp International. $2 billion, but the board thinks I'm unstable. They want proof I've moved on, that I have a stable family. You want me to pretend to be your wife? I want you to be Elena, in public. Board meetings, galas, business dinners. You look enough like her that it could work. 3 months, $1 million. Kimberly stood, the gown rustling. "I can't pretend to be your dead wife. It's not right. $2 million. This isn't about money." She moved toward the door. "Your wife died, Mr. Hemby, pretending she didn't want to heal you. What if she was murdered?" Kimberly froze. Jeffrey crossed to her, pulling a small evidence bag from his jacket. Inside was a yellowed note. "I found this sewn into her wedding dress, the one you tried on." Kimberly read the faded writing. "He's watching me. If something happens, don't trust Vincent. It wasn't an accident. E. Who's Vincent?" "My business partner, Elena's ex-boyfriend. He's on the merger board." Jeffrey's jaw clenched. "I need someone to wear that dress, to be seen as Elena Hemby alive, to make the killer think she survived, that she knows something. I need to draw him out." "You want to use me as bait. I want to catch my wife's murderer and save my company." His eyes were desperate. 3 months. Help me find who killed Elena, and you walk away with $2 million. Kimberly looked at the note, then at him. "If I do this, I need full transparency. No secrets. And if I find out you killed her, I'm going to the police." "Agreed. When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Board meeting at 10 a.m. I'll introduce you as Elena Hemby, my wife, who's been recovering from a private medical situation. You'll wear the wedding dress." She extended her hand. 3 months. Then I disappear." Jeffrey shook it. 3 months. Back in her room, Kimberly stared at the emeralds she'd forgotten to remove. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Elena's room is ready. East Wing, room 212. Move in by 8 a.m. Makeover starts at 9. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Hemby. J.H." Kimberly touched the cold stones at her throat. 12 hours to decide if she was brave enough or foolish enough, to become a dead woman. She walked to the window and looked out at the East Wing's balcony, the railing where Elena Hemby had fallen 3 years ago, and carved into the window glass, barely visible in the moonlight, were more words. Trust no one. Kimberly's blood turned cold. What had she just agreed to? Kimberly didn't sleep. She sat on the narrow bed in her basement room, staring at the emerald necklace she'd placed on the nightstand. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elena's warning scratched into the glass. Trust no one. By dawn, her decision was made. She couldn't do this. The money wasn't worth her life. At 7:30 a.m., she climbed the stairs to Jeffrey's study, the contract he'd slid under her door still unsigned in her hand. She found him standing by the window, coffee untouched on his desk, looking like he hadn't slept either. "Mr. Hemby, I can't accept your offer." He turned slowly. "You agreed last night." "I was in shock. I wasn't thinking clearly." Kimberly set the contract on his desk. "What you're asking is dangerous. If Elena was murdered, then whoever killed her is still out there. Wearing her dress, pretending to be her, that makes me a target. I'll protect you." "You couldn't protect her." The words came out harsher than she intended, but Kimberly pressed on. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Hemby. Truly, but I can't risk my life for this." Jeffrey's jaw tightened. "What about your brother's life?" Before she could respond, her phone rang. St. Mary's Hospital. Again. Kimberly's stomach dropped. "Excuse me," she answered, her hand trembling. "Hello? Miss Taylor, this is Dr. Morrison. I'm calling because Tyler's condition has deteriorated overnight. We need to start the treatment immediately, today, or we'll lose our window. The pharmaceutical company requires the full deposit wired by noon. I'm sorry, but if we don't receive confirmation in the next 4 hours, we'll have to remove him from the trial." The room tilted. 4 hours? I wish I could give you more time, but the treatment protocol is very specific. We need your answer now. Kimberly looked at Jeffrey. He was watching her with those dark, knowing eyes. "I'll have the money by noon," she whispered. "Thank God, I'll prep the team immediately." She hung up and stood there, the phone heavy in her hand. Jeffrey picked up the contract and a pen. "The terms are simple. For the next 3 months, you are Elena Hemby. In public, you attend every event I attend. You wear her clothes, her jewelry, her perfume. You learn her mannerisms, her speech patterns, her preferences. To the outside world, my wife never died. She simply took time away for privacy." "And in private?" "In private, you help me investigate. We review Elena's diary, her calendar, her correspondence. We figure out who wanted her dead and why." He handed her the pen. "You'll have your own suite in the East Wing, your own space. But when we're in public, you are my wife, completely, convincingly." Kimberly stared at the contract. Tyler's face flashed through her mind, pale, thin, fighting for every breath. "What if I can't pull it off? What if people realize I'm not her?" "Then we both lose everything." Jeffrey's voice softened slightly. "But I've seen you in her dress. You can do this." Kimberly took the pen. Her signature looked shaky next to his bold script. "When do we start?" "Now. The board meeting is in 2 hours. Mrs. Alvarez is waiting upstairs with Elena's stylist." He paused. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Hemby." Mrs. Alvarez led Kimberly to the East Wing suite, Elena's suite. The room was exactly as it had been 3 years ago. Perfume bottles on the vanity, a silk robe draped over a chair, fresh flowers in crystal vases, as if someone still lived here. A severe woman in her 50s waited by the bathroom door, professional makeup kit already open. "This is Diane," Mrs. Alvarez said quietly. She was Mrs. Hemby's personal stylist. Diane circled Kimberly slowly, assessing. The bone structure is similar. Eye shape is close enough, but the hair is wrong. Too dark. Elena was lighter, honey blonde with natural highlights. Kimberly's hand went instinctively to her dark brown hair. You want me to dye it? It's non-negotiable. Jeffrey appeared in the doorway, still in his suit from earlier. Elena was blonde. You need to be blonde. 3 hours later, Kimberly sat in front of the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Her hair fell in soft golden waves past her shoulders, expertly highlighted and styled. Diane had shaped her eyebrows, applied makeup that made her features look sharper, more refined. Contact lenses had changed her brown eyes to Elena's distinctive hazel green. Better, Jeffrey said from behind her. He'd been watching the entire time, silent as a ghost. Now the mannerisms. He pulled up a video on his tablet. Elena Hemby at a charity gala, radiant in emerald silk. The way she tilted her head when she laughed. How she touched her collarbone when nervous. The subtle way she hooked her pinky finger through her husband's when they walked. Watch carefully, Jeffrey instructed. Elena never gestured wildly. She was poised, controlled. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. No slang, no contractions unless necessary. Kimberly watched herself disappear with each instruction. The way she naturally crossed her arms, too casual. Her laugh, too loud. Even the way she sat, too relaxed. Try walking, Jeffrey said. Kimberly stood and crossed the room in her normal stride. No. Elena glided, shoulders back, chin up. Imagine you're balancing a book on your head. She tried again, and again, and again. Your voice, Jeffrey said after the 10th attempt. It's too rough. Elena spoke like she was sharing a secret. Everything was intimate, refined. I don't know how to... Say it again. I don't know how to change my voice. But softer. Smoother. Kimberly repeated the sentence, pitching her voice higher, gentler. Jeffrey closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. When he opened them, the look he gave her was unsettling. Not quite seeing Kimberly, but not quite seeing Elena either. Something in between. Again, he whispered. By the time Diane finished, Kimberly felt hollow. She stood in front of the full-length mirror, wearing one of Elena's designer dresses, a cream sheath that hugged her frame perfectly. The blonde stranger staring back moved when she moved, but felt like a puppet. Jeffrey approached slowly, stopping just behind her. His reflection joined hers in the mirror. Perfect, he breathed. You're absolutely perfect. His hand rose as if to touch her shoulder, then fell. The longing in his eyes was almost painful to witness. Kimberly, or whoever she was now, said nothing. She'd learned her first lesson as Elena Hemby. Sometimes silence was the most elegant response. The Hemby Industries boardroom occupied the entire top floor of the downtown headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline, and 20 executives sat around a glass conference table, their voices low with speculation. Kimberly heard them through the closed door. 3 years of erratic behavior. The man hasn't attended a single meeting without canceling at the last minute. The ChemCorp merger is worth $2 billion. We can't have him falling apart during negotiations. Someone needs to say it. Jeffrey Hemby is unfit to lead this company. She looked down at the white wedding dress, the crystals catching the hallway light. Her hands were shaking. You don't have to do this, Jeffrey said quietly beside her. He looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, but his eyes held the same haunted look they always did. We can postpone, give you more time to prepare. No. Kimberly's voice came out soft and measured, Elena's voice now. Let's get this over with. Jeffrey's hand found the small of her back. Even through the silk, she felt the heat of his palm. When we walk in, stay close to me. Don't speak unless someone addresses you directly. If they do, keep your answers brief. You're still recovering, remember? From a private medical situation." Kimberly nodded. Her new blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves. Jeffrey pushed open the boardroom door. 20 heads turned simultaneously. The conversation died mid-sentence. Kimberly stepped into the room, and the silence was absolute. She could hear her own heartbeat, the whisper of silk against her legs, someone's sharp intake of breath. "Gentlemen," Jeffrey said calmly, "I apologize for my absence these past months. As many of you speculated, I've been dealing with a family situation. I'd like you to meet my wife." His arm slid around Kimberly's waist, pulling her against his side. The gesture was possessive, protective, and completely convincing. "Elena?" The oldest board member stood slowly, his face pale. "But we attended your funeral." Kimberly felt Jeffrey's fingers tighten slightly against her ribs, a warning to stay quiet. "The reports of my wife's death were premature," Jeffrey said smoothly. "Elena was critically injured in the fall, yes, but she survived. We kept her recovery private to protect her from media attention. She's only now well enough to resume public appearances." The board erupted in questions, but Jeffrey raised his hand. "All your questions will be answered in time. For now, what matters is this. I am not unstable. I am not unfit. I've been caring for my wife, and now that she's recovered, I'm ready to return to full leadership, starting with the ChemCorp merger." He guided Kimberly to the head of the table, pulling out a chair for her. As she sat, his hand lingered on her shoulder. To anyone watching, it was the touch of a devoted husband. But Kimberly felt the tremor in his fingers, saw the way his eyes darkened when he looked at the dress. For a brief, dangerous moment, she wondered if he was seeing her at all, or just the ghost he'd dressed her to become. "Shall we begin?" Jeffrey said. The board meeting had been a success. The executives bought the story completely. By the time Jeffrey escorted Kimberly out of the building, 3 board members had already called to congratulate him on Elena's miraculous recovery. But back in her suite that evening, alone with the wedding dress hanging in the closet, Kimberly felt nothing but unease. She changed into comfortable clothes and examined herself in the mirror. The blonde stranger staring back still felt foreign. She touched her lightened hair, wondering how much of Kimberly Taylor would be left after 3 months of being Elena Hemby. A glint of light caught her eye. One of the crystals on the wedding dress had come loose, hanging by a single thread. Kimberly retrieved the dress carefully, laying it across the bed. She couldn't let it fall apart. Not when Jeffrey's entire plan depended on this dress making its appearance at the anniversary gala. She found a sewing kit in the vanity drawer and began working on the loose bead. The stitching was intricate, each crystal hand-sewn with remarkable precision. As she tried to reattach the bead, she noticed something odd about the hem. A section of the lining felt thicker than the rest. Kimberly's fingers traced the irregularity. There was something inside the fabric. Something that didn't belong. She carefully unpicked a few stitches in the lining. A folded piece of paper fell onto the white silk. Kimberly's hands trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, written in blue ink that had faded with time. "He is watching me. Every room, every conversation. I found the cameras in the bedroom, the study, and even the bathroom. I tried to leave twice. Both times he knew before I reached the door. He says it's for my protection, but I'm terrified. This isn't love, it's obsession. If you're reading this, I'm either gone or dead. It wasn't an accident. Nothing with him ever is. E.H." The note slipped from Kimberly's fingers. Cameras. Jeffrey had been watching Elena, tracking her every move. Kimberly's eyes darted around the suite. Her suite now. Elena's former suite. How many cameras were hidden in these walls? Was Jeffrey watching her right now? She thought about the board meeting, the way he'd touched her waist, the possessive way his fingers had tightened against her ribs, the longing in his eyes when he looked at her in Elena's dress, the way he'd made her change her hair, her voice, her entire identity. It wasn't an accident. Elena had been afraid of her own husband, had tried to escape, and then she'd fallen from a balcony. Or been pushed. Kimberly stood slowly, her heart hammering. She walked to the window, the same window where Elena had carved her warning. The east wing balcony was just below, its iron railing barely visible in the darkness. The door to her suite clicked. Kimberly spun around, Elena's note clutched in her hand. Jeffrey stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, holding 2 glasses of wine. "I thought you might want company," he said, his eyes dropping to the paper in her hand. "What's that?" Kimberly had hidden the note before Jeffrey could read it. She'd told him it was just a loose thread from the dress, and he'd accepted the lie with a searching look that made her skin crawl. That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of pretending. 3 days of being Elena at every charity luncheon, every business dinner, every carefully orchestrated public appearance. 3 days of wondering if Jeffrey had killed his wife and if Kimberly would be next. Tonight, he'd insisted on a private dinner in the estate's conservatory. Just the 2 of them, he'd said. No audiences, no cameras. But Kimberly didn't believe that anymore. She'd searched her suite and found 2 hidden cameras, one in the smoke detector, another behind the mirror. She'd left them untouched, pretending ignorance while her paranoia grew. Now she sat across from Jeffrey at a small table surrounded by orchids and moonlight, picking at her meal while he watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I'm still adjusting." Her voice came out in Elena's soft, measured tone. "To the role, or to me?" Before she could answer, Jeffrey's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "The caterers mixed up the dessert order for the Morgan Foundation gala. They sent chocolate mousse instead of the creme brulee Elena specifically requested 3 years ago." He looked at Kimberly. "I told them Elena's preferences haven't changed." The absurdity of it hit her suddenly. A man so obsessed with recreating the past that he was arguing with caterers about a dead woman's dessert preferences. A laugh bubbled up before she could stop it. Not Elena's delicate, controlled laugh. Kimberly's real laugh, loud, unrestrained, erupting from somewhere deep in her chest. Jeffrey's face went dark. "That's not funny." The laugh died in her throat. "Elena never laughed like that." His voice was sharp, cutting. "She was refined, elegant. You sound like—" He stopped abruptly, his expression shifting from anger to something else. Realization, maybe, or shame. "I sound like myself," Kimberly said quietly, forgetting Elena's voice entirely. "Because I'm not her. I'm never going to be her, no matter how blonde you make my hair or how many cameras you hide in my room." Jeffrey flinched. "You found them." "Of course I found them." Kimberly stood, her hands trembling. "Just like Elena found them. Is that why she tried to leave? Is that why she's dead?" "I didn't kill her." His voice cracked. "I loved her. Love doesn't come with surveillance." Jeffrey was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A broken, bitter sound. "You're right. God, you're absolutely right." He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw real emotion in his eyes. Not longing for a ghost, but something raw and present. "Elena used to laugh like you just did, before I ruined her, before I became so afraid of losing her that I turned our home into a prison." He stood slowly. "I'll have the cameras removed tomorrow. All of them." "Why?" "Because I don't want to make the same mistake twice." He met her eyes. "I hired you to be Elena, but maybe what I really need is to let her go." The Morgan Foundation Gala was the most important event of the season. 500 guests in black tie, crystal chandeliers dripping light across a ballroom that cost more to rent than most people earned in a year. Kimberly wore a floor-length emerald gown that had been Elena's favorite. The wedding dress reserved for the anniversary gala, still weeks away. Jeffrey stayed close to her side all evening, his hand never leaving the small of her back. Since their conversation in the conservatory 3 days ago, something had shifted between them. He looked at her differently now. Not through her, but at her. Kimberly Taylor, not Elena's ghost. The cameras had been removed, just as he'd promised. But tonight, surrounded by Seattle's elite, Kimberly felt exposed differently. Every eye in the room tracked their movements, whispers following them like smoke. "Mr. Hemby," a smooth voice called out. "A word?" Kimberly turned to see a man in his early 40s approaching, champagne glass in hand. He was handsome in a polished way. Expensive suit, perfect smile, cold eyes. Something about him made her skin crawl. "Vincent," Jeffrey said, his tone carefully neutral. "I don't believe you've been formally introduced to my wife. Elena, this is Vincent Ashford, my business partner." Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes as he studied Kimberly. "Elena, how miraculous. We all thought you were dead." "The reports were exaggerated," Kimberly said softly, using Elena's voice. "Clearly." Vincent took a step closer, his gaze predatory. "You look different, though. Something about the eyes, the way you carry yourself. Almost like you're a completely different person." Jeffrey's hand tightened on Kimberly's waist. 3 years of recovery will change anyone. "I'm sure." Vincent raised his champagne glass in a mock toast. "To miraculous resurrections and convenient timing. Just in time for the ChemCorp merger. How fortunate." He moved as if to clink glasses with Kimberly, then stumbled, or pretended to stumble. Red wine arced through the air, aimed directly at her emerald gown. Jeffrey moved faster than Kimberly thought possible. His hand shot out and caught Vincent's wrist mid-motion, wine splashing harmlessly to the marble floor. The grip was brutal, knuckles white with pressure. "Careful," Jeffrey said, his voice deadly quiet. "You wouldn't want to ruin my wife's dress." Vincent's smile faltered. "It was an accident." "No." Jeffrey twisted Vincent's wrist until the man winced. "It wasn't. Just like Elena's fall wasn't an accident. Just like you showing up at this gala when you told the board you'd be in Tokyo wasn't an accident." The nearby conversation stopped. Heads turned. "You're making a scene," Vincent hissed. "Good." Jeffrey released him with a shove. "Stay away from my wife. If you come near her again, I'll destroy you. Professionally, financially, personally. Are we clear?" Vincent straightened his jacket, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "Crystal." He walked away, and the ballroom slowly resumed its rhythm. Kimberly stared at Jeffrey. She'd never seen him like this. Fierce, protective, almost violent. For her, not for Elena's memory, but for her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand gentle on her arm now. She nodded, her heart racing. "Yes, thank you." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a shift she couldn't quite name but felt deep in her bones. They returned to the estate in tense silence. Jeffrey had barely spoken since the confrontation with Vincent, his jaw clenched, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Kimberly knew she couldn't wait any longer. Vincent had just tried to sabotage her in public. What would he do in private? And Jeffrey's reaction, the raw violence in his defense of her, had changed everything. She needed the truth. She followed him to his study, closing the door behind them. "We need to talk." Jeffrey poured himself a whiskey, his back to her. About Vincent? I'll handle him. About this? Kimberly pulled the folded note from her clutch. Elena's note, the one she'd found sewn into the wedding dress. She placed it on his desk. Jeffrey froze. Where did you get that? The dress. It was hidden in the lining. Kimberly's voice was steady, but her hands shook. She knew about the cameras. She tried to leave. She was terrified of you. He picked up the note with trembling fingers, reading words he'd probably never seen before. His face crumpled. I didn't kill her. The words came out broken. I swear to God, I didn't kill her. But you were watching her, tracking her. She was a prisoner in this house. I was trying to protect her. Jeffrey slammed the glass down, whiskey sloshing over the rim. Vincent was obsessed with her. They'd dated before Elena, and I met, and he never got over it. I started noticing things. Him showing up places he shouldn't be, calling at odd hours, sending gifts. Elena thought I was paranoid, but I knew. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. So I installed cameras, to watch for him, not to control her. But Elena found them before I could explain. She thought I didn't trust her, that I was some kind of monster. His voice cracked. She was packing to leave the night of the gala. We had a terrible fight. She went downstairs to the party, and I stayed up here like a coward, and then... He couldn't finish. Kimberly's chest tightened. Vincent pushed her. I know he did, but I can't prove it. He was surrounded by witnesses all night. Perfect alibi. The police ruled it an accident, and Vincent walked away clean. Jeffrey looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed. That's why I needed you. Why do I need someone to wear that dress? To be seen as Elena alive? I knew if Vincent thought she survived, if he thought she might remember something, he'd make a mistake. Show his hand. I used you as bait. The admission hung in the air between them. You could have told me the truth from the beginning, Kimberly said quietly. Would you have agreed? To knowingly put yourself in danger? She thought of Tyler, of the treatment money, of her own desperate circumstances. Yes, I would have. Jeffrey stood slowly. Then help me finish this. The anniversary gala is in 2 weeks. Vincent will be there. And this time, I won't let him get away with murder. The anniversary gala recreated the night Elena died, down to the last detail. The same ballroom, the same caterer, the same string quartet is playing Vivaldi in the corner. Even the guest list was nearly identical. Everyone who'd been there 3 years ago, watching Elena Hemby fall to her death. Kimberly stood in front of the mirror in the white wedding dress, crystals catching the light like 1,000 tiny stars. Her blonde hair was swept up in the same style Elena had worn that night. The emerald necklace, the one Jeffrey had given his wife on their first anniversary, felt cold and heavy against her throat. You don't have to do this, Jeffrey said from the doorway. He looked devastated in his black tuxedo, the same one he'd worn 3 years ago. We can find another way. There is no other way. Kimberly turned to face him. Vincent needs to believe Elena is alive, that she remembers. It's the only way he'll confess. Jeffrey crossed the room and took her hands. The gesture was tender, protective. Somewhere over the past 3 months, something real had grown between them. Something that had nothing to do with Elena's ghost. If anything happens to you, it won't. She squeezed his hands. You'll be watching. You promised. The gala was in full swing when they arrived. Kimberly descended the grand staircase on Jeffrey's arm, and the room fell silent. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Is that really her? I thought she was dead. She's wearing the same dress from that night. Vincent stood near the bar, his face pale as he watched them approach. Jeffrey had positioned security throughout the ballroom, plainclothes guards who looked like regular guests. They were ready. The evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and careful conversations. Kimberly played her part perfectly, until finally she excused herself to the balcony for air, the same balcony where Elena had fallen. She stood alone in the darkness, the city lights sprawling below, and waited. Footsteps approached behind her. "You're not her." Vincent's voice was quiet, dangerous. "I don't know who you are, but you're not Elena." Kimberly turned slowly. "How can you be sure?" "Because I watched her die." He moved closer, blocking her path back to the ballroom. "I watched her fall from this exact spot. I saw her hit the ground. There's no way she survived." "Then who am I?" Vincent's smile was cold. "A very clever replacement. Jeffrey's desperate attempt to trap me, but it won't work. There's no proof, no witnesses, just like last time." "Why did you kill her?" "Because she wouldn't leave him." The words came out bitter, twisted with years of obsession. "I loved her first. I offered her everything. But she chose him. So if I couldn't have her—" He lunged forward, hands reaching for her shoulders. Kimberly tried to step back, but her heel caught on the hem of the dress. She stumbled, and Vincent's hands connected with brutal force, shoving her toward the railing. The world tilted. The iron rail hit her back, and suddenly she was falling backward into empty air, the ground rushing up to meet her. A hand caught her wrist. Jeffrey. Jeffrey hauled Kimberly back over the railing with strength born of pure terror. She collapsed against him, her legs unable to hold her weight as Vincent tried to run. Security descended before he'd taken 3 steps. 2 guards pinned him to the ground while a third called the police. The entire ballroom had witnessed it. Vincent's confession, his attack, everything. "I've got you," Jeffrey whispered against Kimberly's hair, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I've got you." The police arrived within minutes. Vincent was handcuffed and led away, still screaming that it was an accident, that Kimberly had tripped. But the security footage told a different story. The audio recording, captured by the wire Kimberly had worn beneath the dress, told an even clearer one. Elena's murder would finally have justice. Kimberly gave her statement in a daze, Jeffrey's hand never leaving hers. By the time the police finished, it was past midnight. The guests had dispersed, the ballroom was empty, and Kimberly felt hollowed out, exhausted beyond measure. She climbed the stairs to her suite alone, her entire body trembling with delayed shock. The white wedding dress suddenly felt suffocating, the crystals too heavy, the silk too tight. She needed it off. Now. Her fingers fumbled with the zipper, but it stuck halfway down her back, the same delicate antique zipper that had started everything 3 months ago. The door opened quietly. Jeffrey stood in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, his tie undone. "May I?" Kimberly nodded, too exhausted for words. He crossed the room, and his fingers found the zipper, working it down with practiced ease. The dress loosened, and Kimberly felt like she could breathe again. She stepped out of the silk puddle at her feet, standing there in her slip, suddenly vulnerable. Jeffrey picked up the dress, holding it in both hands. For a long moment, he just stared at it, at the crystals that had caught the light on Elena's wedding day, at the lining where his wife had hidden her final warning, at the hem that had torn when Kimberly nearly fell. Then he walked to the fireplace and tossed it in. The white silk caught flame immediately, crystals melting in the heat, 3 years of grief and obsession turning to ash. "It's over," he said quietly. "Elena can finally rest, and so can I." Kimberly watched the dress burn, feeling something fundamental shift inside her chest. She wasn't Elena. She'd never been Elena. And that was exactly what Jeffrey needed. He turned to face her. Your 3 months are up. The contract is fulfilled. You're free to leave. What if I don't want to leave? His eyes widened slightly. Kimberly. Not as a replacement, not as Elena's ghost, but as myself. She stepped closer. You said you needed to let her go. Well, I need to stop being her. So if I stay, it's as Kimberly Taylor, the woman with the loud laugh and the terrible posture and the brother who's finally in remission. I don't deserve... Maybe not. She took his hand. But you stopped seeing a ghost and started seeing me. That counts for something. Jeffrey pulled her into his arms, and this time there was no pretense, no performance, just two people who'd survived something impossible together. Stay, he whispered. Please stay. She already had her answer. Outside, dawn was breaking over Seattle. The wedding dress had turned to ash in the fireplace. Vincent was in police custody, and Kimberly Taylor, no longer a ghost, no longer pretending, was exactly where she chose to be. 3 months ago, she'd been a desperate maid trying on a forbidden dress. Now she was free, and so was Jeffrey. Some love stories begin with a lie. The best ones end with the truth. You just spent an hour with this story, but here's the brutal truth. 7 out of 10 of you will leave without subscribing. That means next week, when I drop an even more twisted tale, you won't see it. The algorithm will bury it. Don't let that happen. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Because if this story gave you chills, you need to be here for what's coming next. Do it. I'll wait.